In the future, the United States has been devastated by a severe drought, and people are willing to kill for water. Most people have left, but the Holm family stayed because the father, Ernest, believes the plants will grow again if they can get water. Ernest remembers when the land was green, but his son Jerome does not. One day, two thieves try to break into a small building on Ernest's farm by burning the lock. Ernest catches them and starts shooting, killing one thief immediately. The second thief begs for mercy, explaining that someone told him there was water there. He also says he needs to pee and reaches for his pants, but Ernest sees a gun and shoots him first. Jerome sees everything from a distance and says he could have helped, but Ernest just tells him to call him Dad, instead of by his first name. Ernest unlocks the small building, revealing a pump, but unfortunately, there is no water. They have to keep pushing their mule without giving it water. The two continue and meet the Watermen, a group that controls the distribution of water extracted from deep wells through a deal with the government. Ernest gives them supplies, and the men pay with water. He also reminds Jerome not to anger these guys because they are dangerous. They should just make the trade and leave quickly. Ernest often tries to convince the Watermen to provide water for their farm, but they charge too much. On the way back home, their mule collapses and gets badly injured. Since the animal is suffering, Ernest shoots it to end its pain. Jerome cries but swears he could have done it. When they finally get to the farm, Jerome's sister Mary serves them astronaut rations that taste like real meals. Later, she scrubs the dishes with dirt while Ernest listens to the radio and Jerome draws animals, which are their only pastimes. Suddenly, Ernest hears a noise and runs outside to find that Mary has escaped through the window to meet her secret boyfriend. The next day, Jerome and Ernest go to Sam's auction house and bid on a robot known as Simulate Shadow, or Sim, to replace their mule. Sam's son Flaming also bids and fights with them until the end, but Ernest wins the auction, making his debt worse. They then visit the children's mother, Catherine, who cannot walk because of an accident. The hospital has a special machine that connects her to a wire to help her walk, and the only way for the family to bring Catherine home is by buying this expensive machine. After a pleasant afternoon with Catherine, the two head home. On the road, they see Roby and Seuss with their baby. Ernest calls them vultures for using their child as a sympathy card to get money and drives away to ignore them. They arrive at the gas station, and after filling the tank, Ernest drinks a little to round off the price. Then he leaves a little water back to Roby and his family. The couple is thinking about selling the baby because they can't support him, but Ernest advises them not to do that and promises to help them with water later. At the farm, Flem appears, revealing he is Mary's secret boyfriend. He asks to borrow Sim and promises to pay a rental fee, but Ernest refuses unless Sam signs a guarantee. Flem gets offended and tells Ernest he will never irrigate that land before leaving. The next time Jerome and Ernest meet the Watermen, they do well thanks to Sim, and Ernest starts convincing the guys to consider an offer to put a water line on his farm. Ernest begins to dig up his old pump so the Watermen can check what they have. While working, he tells Jerome he needs to go out and meet a girl or at least make some friends, but Jerome prefers to take care of his family. On the way home, they see Flem speeding past the farm. Mary washes clothes by putting a cleaning agent in the vacuum cleaner. Ernest arrives and forbids her from going out again, causing Mary to rebel and say she is old enough to do what she wants, while Ernest swears he just wants to protect her. Mary says she hates her father and loves Flem, then tries to run away. She bumps into Jerome and asks for money, giving Ernest time to catch up and stop her. Mary cries, claiming Ernest failed the family, so he locks her up and nails the window shut. Some time later, Ernest and Jerome wake up and discover that Sim has been stolen. Ernest assumes it was Flem and goes to his house but learns from Sam that Flem left that morning in a truck to the mountains. It's revealed that Ernest's farm used to belong to Sam, and Flem is obsessed with what his family lost, though Sam thinks the land is barren and water won't help. Ernest goes to the mountains to investigate and is suddenly knocked out. At night, Ernest wakes up in the Watermen's camp, accused of stealing their supplies using Sim. Ernest insists he didn't do it, but the leader Caleb attacks him. A fight ensues, and after much struggle, Ernest manages to steal Caleb's knife and a rifle, which he fires into the air to keep everyone away. He escapes while Caleb continues shouting threats. On the way home, Ernest finds Flem sleeping near a fire and sees Sim nearby. Flem stole the machine and supplies to make Ernest look guilty. Ernest waits until morning to wake him with the rifle in his face, then ties Flem to Sim, who carries the supplies as they walk under the scorching sun to find the Watermen. Flem continues to provoke Ernest by talking about Mary, so Ernest pulls the rope to make him fall as punishment. Eventually, both are too thirsty to survive much longer, and Flem convinces Ernest to stop for a drink. The supplies have alcohol, not water, and soon Ernest is getting drunk because of his addiction. Flem pretends to drink while claiming Caleb wants his head, so he only stole the machine to survive. He even offers Ernest money, but he refuses because the story seems suspicious. Then Ernest tries to get up, but the alcohol makes him dizzy, and he can barely move. It was Flem's plan all along, and he takes the chance to hit Ernest with a rock, making him hit his head on the cliff and pass out while bleeding. Ernest has a flashback of Catherine's car accident, which was caused by his drinking habits. Later, when Ernest wakes up, he is tied to Sim and Flem starts pouring more alcohol into his mouth, screaming like a maniac. Flem then goes to the farm and Mary jumps on his bike so they can run away together. Worried about Ernest, Jerome decides to look for him. When night falls, he finds Sim at the waterman's camp where the men say his father died from an accident with the machine. At the funeral, Mary returns and the siblings cry together. They also have to visit their mother to give her the bad news. Flem picks them up in his truck and takes them home. At the farm, a furious Jerome starts hitting Sim with a hammer. Then Flem comes to stop him and explains that grieving is hard but he can't let it ruin a source of income. He offers to become the new head of the family to help the siblings and surprises Jerome by announcing that Mary is pregnant. Flem has big plans for the farm and Jerome agrees to let him try. In the afternoon, Flem takes supplies to the waterman and asks Caleb to put a water pipe on the farm. At first, Caleb refuses, but suddenly Flem blames him for Ernest's death since Caleb's shotgun and knife were found with the body. Afraid of the possible consequences, Caleb agrees to divert the water to the siblings' land. A few days later, the new farm pump was officially installed. And Flem works hard all day to plant and grow wheat, which is watered by sprinklers. A few weeks later, Jerome is surprised to see a small leaf on the ground, and eventually, the land is covered with wonderful plants. To celebrate, Flem and Mary get married and tattoo each other's initials on their hands. During the party, Flem drinks and keeps thinking about Ernest's death. A few days pass, and Sam arrives at the farm with two bank men. It turns out that Ernest's debt is huge, and they want Flem to pay it. Flem scares the horses with his motorcycle just to look tough, and Sam scolds him, explaining that no one ever wanted to buy the land, and Ernest had it because he simply never moved. Thanks to the water and crops, the bank can sell it, so Flem must pay if he doesn't want to lose it. That night, Flem puts Sim in his truck and picks up Roby with his baby. He pretends they will ask for some prices just to get an idea, but plans to sell the baby against Roby's will. Desperate, Roby asks for the baby back, and the buyers open fire, killing Roby. They try to shoot Flem too, but he shoots back while escaping, leaving the machine behind. Sim gets caught in the crossfire, and the damage causes it to activate a mode that guides it back to the original factory. The next day, Flem pays the bank with the money from the baby but tells the siblings he sold Sim to Roby. Meanwhile, Sim arrives in town and is found by its builder, Calvin, who finds the owner's information and calls the farm. Jerome answers the call and becomes suspicious. He then runs to the local market, where he finds Flem talking to Seuss, who is holding a doll pretending to be her baby. Noticing this, Jerome tries to talk to them but Flem quickly takes Seuss away. Later at the farm, Jerome asks Flem about Roby, but Flem says Roby took Sim and abandoned his family. Determined to find the truth, Jerome says he is visiting his mother but actually takes a bus to the border. However, the guards do not let him through because he is underage and without a guardian. At that moment, he is approached by Anna, who offers to help him cross if he pays her. Jerome agrees, and Anna puts him in a truck full of chickens. In a few hours, the truck reaches the city, and Jerome sees it for the first time. He reunites with Anna, who takes him to the factory but only accepts half the money as payment. She explains that the return trip is a scam. He doesn't need a guide to go back because no one will stop him from leaving. Before departing, Jerome asks if she has ever met a man named Ernest, but Anna does not recognize the name. Then, Jerome meets with Calvin, who shows him all the functions of the machine. It turns out Sim's eyes are cameras designed to capture the landscape for reforestation and recorded everything Sim saw. Calvin teaches Jerome how to use it and gives him some privacy. Jerome becomes emotional seeing his father again, but this turns into horror when he discovers that Flem killed Ernest. Flem had tied Ernest to the machine and sent it towards the waterman camp, making it look like Sim lost control and dragged Ernest to his death by accident. Jerome has a breakdown in the office. At night, it starts to rain on the farm for the first time in over a decade. Jerome soon returns and acts normally, asking Flem how he got Sim back. Flem is confused and checks the barn, shocked to see Sim there without damage. He says Roby must have brought it back out of guilt. A few days later, Jerome visits Catherine for real and promises to take care of her like Ernest did. One afternoon, Flem and Jerome are hunting animals to keep them away from the crops. Flem misses all his shots and hands the rifle to Jerome, blaming the gun for his failure. Jerome is very tempted to shoot Flem, but instead, he kills a deer, proving the problem is Flem's aim. When they return home, Jerome hides the rifle in his room. During lunch, Jerome says he received a call from Roby looking for Flem. This irritates Flem, and he explodes, saying Jerome is lying. Mary scolds him for his attitude, and Jerome insists he is telling the truth. Flem leaves the room in a rage. The next day, Flem receives a letter written by Jerome pretending to be Roby. The message asks Flem to meet Roby at the cliffs because he is in trouble. Before leaving, Flem looks for the rifle, and Jerome says he took it for repairs since Flem said it wasn't working well. Flem pretends to accept this to avoid suspicion and apologizes for his outburst at the table. After grabbing a knife, Flem goes to the cliffs with Sim and calls for Roby. Suddenly, he falls into a hidden hole and breaks his legs. Flem screams in pain and begs Sim for help, but the machine does not understand. At that moment, Jerome appears, holding a rock, making Flem realize that Jerome knows the truth. Desperate, Flem begs for mercy, but Jerome ignores him and keeps watching, letting him suffer under the scorching sun. Eventually, Flem starts screaming for help again and begs Jerome to think about his sister and the baby. He makes a long speech about accidents and regret, making Jerome so angry that he finally shoots Flem, killing him. When Jerome returns home, he lets Mary think that Flem abandoned her and does not tell her how Ernest really died. Thanks to the money from the crops, they can now buy real food, and the siblings agree they can finally buy the machine so Catherine can live with them. Jerome deletes all the footage from Sim, ready to start fresh and enjoy decent meals for the future. If you like the video guys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more such content.